My name is Joe Barhoon with Geeks Worldwide, and I am so excited. 6 years later, here I am sitting down with my friend Blake J. Harris, the author of the nonfiction novel Console Wars, as well as his friend and co-director and co-producer, Jonah Tulis. Gentlemen, how are you?
I mean, now I feel like terrible. I feel like it's been 6 years, and your site has grown, your audience has grown. You have 3 kids. You were telling me, and all I've done is just like gain weight, and I'm still working on the same story. So like, what's next?
We've been
So I'm good. No, I'm very good.
Many years.
Jonah and I have been away in a cave working on this movie for years, off and on, but you know, it's such a passion project. So I feel great. We're so excited to finally share it with the world. It's awesome.
This is unbelievable. Go ahead, Jonah.
It was actually a cave underneath a pool.
Yeah.
A cave underneath a pool?
It's hard to describe.
I can't even. It's like a lair?
It is a lair.
It is like a lair.
Okay.
There's a good way to put it.
It's on the side of a mountain in Silver Lake, California.
Yeah. The film was edited in a lair. That is factually correct.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a first. So congrats. Hopefully we get something phenomenal out of this. And from what I understand, there's 2 parallel projects going on. So I want to talk about those, but I think it'd be good for people who maybe aren't familiar with the project and aren't familiar with the nonfiction novel from 2014. Let's just start there, if you don't mind, Blake. Just tell us quickly, what is this book? What is it all about? And why should people care about it?
Sure. So it's the greatest story ever told. And I, as a book author, and John and I, as, documentarians and storytellers for the series, we were lucky enough to get to tell it. And that's sincerely how I feel. It is a great story that is appealing to anybody, and I'm not just hyping it up, but I'll explain a little bit. So, the book and the documentary, and eventually the TV series adaptation, they all tell the story of Sega's rise, and basically this underdog story about how Sega, with less than 5% of the market in 1990, was able to take on the juggernaut of Nintendo, which owned and dominated the video game industry, give them a run for their money through all sorts of, outside the box tactics, and with a team of unlikely heroes, and surpass Nintendo, and then watch it all tragically fall away. So it's, a nice sort of Shakespearean drama. And the book and the documentary are told largely, or at least not largely in the documentary, because we have so many compelling characters, but the book is told largely through the protagonist, Tom Kalinske. And he's just, a great role model and someone that is a great point of view for the story, because as I like to joke, other than my parents, Tom is the guy most responsible for my childhood. Other than them, before Sega, he helped create the Flintstones chewable vitamins, and then He-Man, Master of the Universe, and Barbie, and then obviously Sega. And so it's this guy that's just had this magic touch and like his influence on so many of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And so to see him at the front and center in this documentary is wonderful. And like I said, I can't express my gratitude to get to tell this story, just because it's something that Jonah and I talk about all the time. Truth really is stranger than fiction. If we had scripted out what we wanted to happen with Sega and Nintendo, it wouldn't have been as good as what actually happened. And we were fortunate too to have characters that, in their own words, is better than anything we could script. So having Tom Kalinske and Howard Lincoln from Nintendo, and Peter Main from Nintendo, and Ellen Beth Van Buskirk from Sega, having these rivals tell the story in their own words is just, it's a real treat.
I love it. So Jonah, how did you get involved in this project?
Well, it's actually the origin of this story is sort of Blake came to me. He's like, I think there's this story here. Sega, Nintendo, the early days, there's a lot more here than we realized. And there's nothing out there. There's no books. There's no documentaries. There was a little bit, but nothing that really covered sort of the world we were wanting to cover, the Tom angle, sort of the misfits at Sega, and Blake started just reaching out to these people and talking to them. And he's like, we're filmmakers, but there's a book here.
Yeah, just some background. Jonah and I had been working together, writing film scripts and producing movies, and Jonah had directed, had directorial experience since 2005. So, he's talking about, 7 years later. So,
yeah,
of course, Jonah, the person I would talk to about this kind of stuff,
It was on a list with our new manager, Julian Rosenberg, who is one of the main producers on this project as well. And we just started shooting around the idea, and then we're like, we should try to get a book done. We should try to make a documentary, because there's so much great media. You got to have that media and see the visuals. And you know what? This would also make a social network type movie, like a like a cool, like, you know, movie about guys starting a business and running with it. And we're like, you know what, if one of those things works out, that's amazing. And, you know, as you do in Hollywood, and even in the book world, you want to attach talent. And we had a relationship with Seth Rogen and his team, Evan Goldberg and James Weaver. And we're like, you know, Seth's a big gamer, Evan's a big gamer, let's go to them and maybe just get them on board as an executive producer on the doc, or just sort of get them involved. And Blake and I went out there, and this is many years ago, and we had a great, maybe 2-hour meeting with them, just talking about the story and sort of how we developed it. And for the first time,
it was January 6th, 2012. I'll never forget the day, because it was like actually life-changing for us.
Yeah. And that same day they said, you know what? It's the same day. It wasn't even like, let's think about this a week. They're like, we want to do this. We want to help you sell the book. We want to make the doc. We're going to get the financing. And we want to make a feature movie on it as well, based on this same IP. And time passed and passed. The book got set up at a publisher. The documentary, we were, you know, lots of lawyering and lots of, you know, waiting, and sort of eventually Scott Rudin, who is a mega producer, came on and helped us with this and set it up as a movie at Sony as well. So it was like, he's the producer of The Social Network, so we're going to do The Social Network of gaming. And the documentary started production. And then throughout that process, they were like, you know what, this is a TV series instead. So that slowed the docs process. The book comes out. We kept working on the doc, but it kind of got stalled for a while they figured out the TV situation. And then they set up the TV show and the doc at Legendary Pictures, and then eventually at CBS TV Studios and CBS All Access. And now we have a great book, a awesome doc, and a potential amazing series at CBS All Access that tells the story, you know, with actors, and just sort of takes it to another level of compelling storylines.
And that's, go ahead, Blake.
I just want to say that, like, you know, Jonah mentioned it a couple of times, The Social Network. I think that was an inspiration in a couple of ways. One being that I remember first hearing about Chris Sorkin doing the script about Facebook, and I was like, well, that sounds very terrible. Who cares? But then you see it's actually a universal human drama story for tech people and, you know, anyone. So finding that this story was very similar, that it was, you know, a great story for gamers and also just a great story, just a great David and Goliath story, a great business story, was important. And, you know, early on when John and I were thinking that I was going to write this book, we saw potential in an adaptation, and that we wanted to do this documentary. You know, some people said, oh, like, you kind of have to pick one lane. And part of our wanting to do all three was that we had, you know, they're all lottery tickets. We didn't know what to succeed. But part of it, too, was like we were thinking about The Social Network and how much we love that film and how much we love the book by Ben Mesrick, Accidental Billionaires. And, like, when you love something like that, wouldn't you want to see a documentary where you see the real people telling the story? Like, it's sort of like the way film works nowadays, where if you're really into something, you just want to get more and more of an authentic experience. And so that's always, you know, I think been a big part of our thinking with this, and why we're so excited, because it's a similar story, of course. All of them are, but it feels so different each time, because you're getting different vantage points, and you're also just getting to learn more about the people and what actually happened.
I want to dive into that. So, Joni, you mentioned this takes it to another level. Blake, you're giving some examples about how it's different. So we had the book. Anybody can buy it right now. It's on Amazon. I'm sure it's elsewhere too. But now we've got a new way of delivering the story through this documentary. Tell me a little more about how it's different from the book, or what ways it is the next level.
Well, it has all the footage that brings you back in a different kind of nostalgic way. It has these characters. We dive deep into them, and you're hearing it through their words. Like, they're the ones narrating the story, taking you through this. And you want to get on these guys' sides, and sort of it really moves like a narrative film, even though it's a documentary. It's these guys telling their story there's a lot of action, a lot of excitement. And, you know, you really get to sort of paint the picture. There's like a tapestry of archival game footage. Yeah. So that really brings you back. Yeah, there's archival footage that you won't believe.
John and I, the phrase all the time was time capsule. We wanted to feel like as soon as you hit play, open up this time capsule from years ago, and you're there from start to finish. That's why we didn't want to have a narrator. We wanted the characters to take us through the story. And like, specifically with regards to what's different from the book and how it takes it to a different level is, when I was writing the book, and I've said this before, that my ideal reader is my grandma. Like, how do I get her to care about the story? And there is pros and cons to that. Finding the universal broad appeal is I think a great way to find the inner value, and then also is a great way to weave in the history. Like, so much of what's special about that era, especially because it's a largely marketing story, is like the commercial and the archival footage from the trade shows. And there's no amount that you can describe that with words that would match just seeing it. And so seeing the old commercials, like, a lot of times I did, because, if I were to describe that, it might be off-putting to people who don't remember the commercials, but you could see an old commercial from MTV and still, it brings you back in time. Or even if you don't specifically remember that, I do remember what newscaster stairs used to look like back in the 80s and 90s, and the way that people talked and the way that people, excited about these things, and the way that before Sega, they saw them as, toys, as childish playthings, and not as like a bigness. And so it really transports you back in time in a way that I think no literary work just possibly can.
We try to get a feeling out of somebody. People see sort of a commercial that they remember when they were a child, even just for a split second, and it gives them a feel. And at the same time, we take the music of that era. We have a lot of popular music, from that era. We have the Spin Doctors, Salt and Pepper, Biggie, sort of that all adds to sort of this time capsule element we really tried to capture.
Oh my gosh, Salt and Pepper. Memories, they're flooding back.
Salt and Pepper, we play Push It during a CES trade show montage, and you're seeing all of the 90s technology and how they think this is the most impressive thing ever, which it was at the time. And it's a lot of fun looking back. There's a lot of comedy in this too, a lot of comedy.
Yeah, one of the favorite moments in the film, I think is one that you love too. It's like we have a newscaster at that CBS trade show in 1991 that Jonah was talking about, where Sega unveils Sonic and sort of, knocks the wind out of Nintendo sales for the first time. And we have a reporter showing a video camera that's like the size of the Empire State Building. No, that's like a big video camera, and saying like, he's like, these things, like, video can never get smaller. Like, this is the stuff they'll ever get. And that, the comedy compared to what we have today for, on our own video cameras. That's another great example where, like, I think that would just be distracting in a book, but because it's such an organic part of the ambience when we're going to CES, it really helps make the scene.
So go ahead, Jonah.
You see Vanna White, you see George Foreman, you see Hulk Hogan in the CES, and it's kind of funny. It's like, oh wow, these are the iconic characters of that era, like at this trade show where Sega's about to reveal Sonic.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Even just like thinking about those people brings back so many memories, especially Hulk Hogan, because, every kid, at least every boy liked Hulk Hogan when they were, young boys. Yeah. Okay. So you're telling me that because of the fact that it's now the platform, instead of being a book, it's going to be on television. So you can now use visuals, and you can go back and pull up some nostalgia with the trailers and the commercials and that type of thing, plus the characters of the time. But I'm wondering if there's content that would have been in the book that you knew about in 2014 that you just, in a way, you saved it for this larger project that you guys had earmarked 8 years ago.
Yeah, there's some stuff like that. Some stuff that is just much more visually feels like important and feels relevant. Obviously, in general, a 500-page book is going to have, much more information than a 90-minute movie. There are some things that just wouldn't have worked in the book that work in the film, and one of our other favorite elements that really holds it all together is the animation. Obviously, that wouldn't be in the book, but that's just a aesthetic design like that. It's kind of interesting, or maybe it's just interesting to me because I think about it a lot. Because the second book I wrote took place in 2012 to like 2016, so modern times, and it was just such a different process. Not just because I had a book under my belt, but it's such a different process to document, whether in book form, documentary form, something that happened post-internet, especially post-smartphone, where there's so much footage for every moment of everything versus like, even initially just finding like video footage of Tom Kalinske in 1990 is like, it's not very easy. Or, maybe you get 2 seconds and this is a guy who's going to be in the 20 minutes of the film. So coming up with creative solutions, and also just so many of the gems that Jonah and our Bayer and others involved were able to, like, that was like, it was like mining for gold, like just like going down these YouTube searches or these archival, video searches, and coming up with this stuff. And like, I think that is, John and I sort of joke, or I mean, we mean it sincerely, like the true star of this film is archival. It is the animation, is the original score by Jeff, which all to another level. He's the guy who did House of Cards score, so he has experience doing.
I believe he had 7 Emmys. He built this magical score that incorporates video games and just incredible energy, a lot of fun. It feels like an action movie score, but it's documentary, and it works, and it really, really works. It's really magical. I think there's a sense of magic in this. You have kids opening presents and sort of connecting with that you can't really get on the page. You can get way more information into a book, but this, we were able to dramatize scenes in a way that was really interesting, and you don't really see in a doc. Perfect example is you had the Senate hearings, which you read about. Joe Lieberman led the Senate hearings. Well, we have both the guys on Sega and Nintendo there, Bill White and Howard Lincoln, talking about this, and then we get in the Senate hearings, and we're literally with them in this dramatic Senate hearing. We get the comedy of it, but it's also very dramatic, and we're hearing this amazing Jeff Beal score, and it feels like you're in this dramatic Senate scene. We had 9-minute versions of this we couldn't use. We cut it down to a really tight section, but like there's something you can do with a doc that you can't do in anything else, where you can really create drama using footage.
And I think one of the things and one of the things that I loved most about this medium is that it's sort of a fine line to walk with telling a story like this, where, like what Jonah's saying, the Senate sub-hearings on violence in video games, especially now, what they were talking about was so tame, like violent, or in a 16-bit Mortal Kombat game is so different than what you could do in TA1 even. Like, so we always wanted to walk a line where we wanted it to be kind of like funny, that like that was what passed for violence, but also not, make fun of the story, because we always want to be in minds and the hearts of the characters, and to them it wasn't funny. And having score and having the talk heads take us through it really helped us, like, for the tone. I feel like that was something that I felt like was one of the things for us to capture at first, was to like get that tone where this is a fun movie. They're not, not investment bankers doing, but also at the same time, are grown men, women acting like little boys and girls at times, and being kind of petty and being vindictive at the same time, that actually made a difference and created products that we loved. So there was a lot going on. And like, we could really try to capture it, and I'm very proud of what we're able to do, and definitely tip a cap FBL. Like, I think the score is what actually makes that work well.
So this is an interesting time, in my opinion, for this documentary to release, because of course the big thing happening this fall is the release of the Xbox Series X and the PS5. And we're in this sort of 2 console war. Maybe I shouldn't say console war, but there's a battle going on between Microsoft and Sony with the Xbox and the PlayStation. This is, I think it's been 5 or 6 years since the last consoles came out. So I understand from what we've talked about thus far that the timing of this is to a degree out of your control. Like, work has to be done in order for the product to be ready. But I'm curious if, at least in your opinions, gentlemen, if the timing of this is actually a good thing for people who are of our age, like our generation, who grew up with these older consoles, to somehow draw some parallels to what's happening today.
There are 100% parallels. I think the console wars have been going on even before, even before Nintendo. Atari was fighting other console companies, and they were also fighting sort of their downfall was some of these bad games and the oversaturation of the market. That was a console war. Then obviously Nintendo and Sega, and as a big part of this doc is also the console war within the console war, which was the civil war between Sega of America and Sega of Japan, which is why this isn't just called console war, it's called console wars, because there are a lot of battles going on multiple fronts at all times. And then, Sony comes in, takes them on. The console wars are going to continue until there's no more consoles. And then it's,
I think it's a good question. Like, maybe like a good justification for us. It took a little longer than we wanted, but it was a good timing. But part two that's interesting is, I think that because the film touches on such universal themes, both in business and editing and in just like these personal lives. Like I feel like it's often a good time because whether even if new Microsoft, let's say this came out a year late, the consoles will have just come, but also like then you have streaming with Netflix, our home CBS Access, and also with music streaming wars, and like it's just a universal business battle that goes on and that we see more and more now in like sort of expedited business world. So I do think it's a good observation. I think it is running, but I also think that there's something about the story that there's so many, it relates in so many different ways to different things. It's kind of universal, and there's a lot of times for it.
Although I will tell you, the Sega Nintendo console war is a special console war. I think it's the most important console war. I think it's the one where it's not Sony and Microsoft, these two huge corporations that are super corporate. These were small teams of people taking on another small team of people and literally controlling the entire video game market. Guerrilla marketing like you'd never seen before. Going down to Arkansas because Walmart wouldn't carry Sega products, and bombarding the town with billboards and football cushions at the University of Arkansas, big gaming center for everybody to play in the town. This is stuff that Sony and Xbox are not doing. They're just bombarding us with ads and sort of the console wars between Sega and Nintendo.
Also, like even like Jonah and I can give you 50 million reasons why we think this console war is the most important console war, the most fascinating console war, or whatever than today. But like, it's just different from the perspective of the employee. So one of the great joys for me, at least, telling the story was that 25, 30 years later, all the Sega employees still hate all the Nintendo employees and vice versa. And so it's like they really disliked each other. There really was this rivalry, and I do think it's pretty clear that like that dislike and that ambition is what led to things that benefited us as gamers. And flash forward to today or to last week, with the new announcements from Microsoft and Sony, and you see even like the Xbox account, or maybe the Xbox account, like tweeted something about like making love not war, like basically like someone had complained that they were going to get a Sony PlayStation 5 instead of an Xbox, and they're like, that's great too. So Tom wanted to destroy Nintendo, and Howard Lincoln and Nintendo wanted to destroy Sega, and now at least publicly, Sony and Microsoft don't like deny there's a console war. And I mean, there's a definite upside to that. I think the downside is insincere. Like inside of those companies, the people are still competing against another. And while this may not be like the last console war in terms of hardware, we're just going to deal with more and more software platform wars. Like whether Sony, whether it's like a Sony subscription or a subscription Nintendo, like whatever format, or even like John was saying, like battles on different terrains, like this core battle is still going to be happening. It just might be in on a different frontier.
Blake always says the real winner of all these console wars is the consumer, because these companies are sort of just trying to one up each other, make better games and better graphics and better systems and better stories. And who wins? The consumers, the people who are buying these games and getting a higher level of quality because of the competition.
I do agree with that. It's definitely the true thing. And now the next paradigm seems to be streaming of the video games, like you'd mentioned. So you have Microsoft has their xCloud, which I think is now called Game Pass streaming. So $15 a month, you get everything that Microsoft has to offer around Xbox digitally, like Game Pass, for example, and even a subscription to EA Origin. And then you can also stream to your Android device, including your phone and your tablet. That's a whole other, I mean, who would have thought we'd be having these conversations 25, 30 years ago? So that might be the next thing. Now, I want to call something out, though. So I intentionally said a few minutes ago that there's Microsoft and Sony. I left out Nintendo because, in my opinion, Nintendo is sort of doing their own thing. I feel like they're on totally different clip, right?
I actually think the same exact thing. I feel the same exact way you do. They're in their own world.
Right. So I'm curious to ask you, gentlemen, since you've been doing this now for 8 years, you've been engrossed in this historical set of events, are you surprised by the current state of Nintendo and Sega?
Well, like certainly in the history, it's surprising that where they were in 1990 and where they left off in 96 for the book and the documentary, and like where they were in 2012 is surprising. Like it's surprising that Sega was able to compete and defeat or not defeat, but to surpass Nintendo and no longer was in the hardware business. And it was surprising that Nintendo was doing its own thing. In David and Goliath, Goliath is saying, but there's not many versions of that story where Goliath is like, you know what, I'm just gonna go, play chess. You're either in the game or you're not. But Nintendo, to your point, has done this other thing, and I've actually come over the years, I've come to really respect that. Nintendo. I don't think Nintendo would be doing. I don't think they'd be operating the way they are now if not for Sega. I think Sega painted them to a corner, really challenged their identity, and as a result, Nintendo asked themselves some tough questions about who they wanted to be. Did they want violence in names? Did they want to be the Disney company? And in the end, they decided that they did want to be that company. And that's not as much of a foregone conclusion as it may seem in retrospect. Like they were willing to compromise on some values for a period of time, and they really, they had there was a potential CD property which would have had more full motion video, and I feel like Nintendo decided, you know what, that is what we definitely want to be, and maybe there'll be pros and cons, and maybe there'll be times in the short run where it seems like this is not the best business decision, but they've always been a long-term focused company, and I do really admire them for that. And I especially admire, since the book came out over 6 years ago, I'd be asked, like, oh, what would you like to see Nintendo do? And probably unsurprisingly, like I always wish that they would embrace their past a bit more. It was hard to get like Mario Brothers 3. Like, they didn't, and in the years since they had the virtual console on the Wii, but it's been such a big part of, the Switch, the allure of a Switch is like the, NES or the SNES subscriptions. And, they had the amiibos and like they brought more and more old school characters and newer characters into Nintendo. This is really a long-winded way of saying that my sense of Nintendo back in 2014 was that we're sort of like a Bill Belichick thing. Like, we're not here to talk about Cincinnati. We're not here to talk about the past. Let's just focus on what's next. And they've instead been able to do that while also really embracing their heritage. And I think that's been a great business move, and also something that helps make Nintendo special. Nintendo is a family-friendly company. It's something that I'm sure you'll enjoy with your children. And there's not many things in this world that, a parent and child could both genuinely enjoy, but Nintendo puts out those products, and that's really nice.
And they're never going to rush a console. You can think back to N64 when they're never going to rush a console. They're never going to just be like, oh, Xbox and Sony have something. We got to be the third console in this war. We're going to focus on our core business, do what we do best, and keep making the great games and great systems and not compromise. And they've done that. And I think that Nintendo's been, obviously they've wavered, as Blake said, but they've been consistent in what they've done for, their entire video game existence. And Sega, obviously, most people don't know, they're still sort of making games and monetizing some of their IPs. Blake and I were even in Sega Japan headquarters, and we kind of got to see it firsthand. And it isn't surprising, I think. I'm not surprised that Sega has kind of gone that way. They had a hit with the consoles, but sort of I think the difficulties between what was working in Japan, what was working in the US, initially the Genesis wasn't even successful in Japan. It was very successful in the US, not in Japan. And sort of I think those differences really, hurt their console business in the future. And it makes sense they haven't come back with another console because, they never really, after 96, I feel like, yes, it was Dreamcast, but they never really got back up to where they were in terms of consoles.
Yeah, well, I've always believed that games sell consoles. So for Nintendo to have their first-party titles, of course, Mario and Zelda and all the rest, and those are nowhere else to be found. So I guess they're on iOS and Android, right? But not very much. And it sounds like that whole thing got shut down. So anyway, you can only play those amazing games on a Nintendo device. And Sega has some awesome IP, but I feel like I'm seeing it, it's everywhere now. So if they were to create a console, now after being in business for decades, it would probably require that that IP were popular and then exclusive to any Sega future console.
Right. And what you're saying is so true about games sell the console. That's something that Nintendo and Sega both embraced back in the day. And, Tom Kalinske took that a step further by giving away that game, the hit games for free. But also the reverse is true and important to remember, and also helps sort of explain now, where consoles are just there to sell the games. Like, if there was a way for Tom Kalinske or Nintendo or even anyone to like snap their finger and consoles would be in everyone's homes for free, that's fine, because they're in the software business. That's where they make their money, and that's kind of where we're getting to with the future of gaming, and with services and platforms being the product much more so than the piece of hardware. And because there's a lot more money to be made there. And also just knowing from my work in the second book with Oculus, like the software business is so much more flexible to be in, aside from even just the profit margins. But like, if you make a mistake on a piece of hardware, you have to recall every piece of hardware and fix it. If you have a glitch in a piece of software, you just send out an update.
Yeah.
And then you're fine. And you can also test things. You try to see what people like. You can actually, bring betas to the market sooner. So it's not surprising that that's sort of the direction that the console wars or these different video game companies are going to be battling in the future.
This is probably the last major console release, I think, before the internet is powerful enough for the next gen Apple TV to house serious gaming. And, I think this could be the last console.
I agree with you. I think that's the case. I don't know about Nintendo, though. I think they're going to keep doing their thing where they create these immersive designs, whether it's portable or some kind of tablet, or not tablet, but a combo, a hybrid is the word I meant to use, with a console. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fascinating as long as the consumer continues to win, like you and Blake have said. There needs to be some kind of push and pull, right, between do you want this, consumer, or not? And then, of course, getting that question from two or more manufacturers helps, because then it creates that competition. So I'm curious if you guys are spending all of this time. What a big deal, right? I mean, if you don't mind me saying, this is so cool that here you are finally getting your TV documentary about to release, and we'll get to those details in a moment. And then of course you have the series coming later. But I'm curious, do you get any time to play video games? And if you do, what are you playing?
The answer is, of course, not as much as we'd like, but I guess I'm a creature of it. I also have some compulsive tendencies. So for the past few months, I pretty much play 8-bit Legend of Zelda on my Switch every night. I just play it and, challenge myself to things like, can you beat the game without getting the hearts at the end of the levels and just taking the Triforces, or like, so I play that over and over and over, which is probably a weird answer, but I love Zelda.
I've been playing the Nintendo Mini of the old games too. It's sort of like I've gone back to that because I just haven't had the time to play the real serious games I used to play. But no, I mean, we really both like playing these sort of retro games. It just, especially after doing this movie, you sort of it brings you back, and like there's a lot of excitement just kind of like bringing those games up in the muscle memory of it all. And
also, like, to out myself, I'm terrible at games. Like, I'm good at Zelda now, and I've always been a natural at NHL 94. But, like, I never really got that much into first-person shooters, and I don't have the greatest hand-eye coordination. So,
also, these kids are too good these days. You play on online.
Yeah.
They kill you. They're like, switch teams. I'm like, I can only play a little bit. Like, you're like, I've been on here for 10 hours. Like, you suck. And then,
Yeah, it's brutal. Like Call of Duty, Fortnite, I can't play those games, man.
Right. So, I mean, like, we're like, Jonah and I are kind of like, the senior citizens in the home, like listening to the radio instead of the newfangled television. But at least we're not deluding ourselves to think like, oh, this TV is great, even though we can't see. Like, we know, all right, we're doing the radio. That's our medium.
So Blake, go ahead, Jonah.
Gamers and more nostalgists.
Nostalgists, that's a thing.
Yeah, I think we're nostalgists. We love the nostalgia of these games and sort of that era, and that's sort of what drew us to the material initially. And then obviously we uncovered this great story with these great people.
Very genuine answers. Go ahead, Blake.
I think I'm a deficient human being, and I don't really experience nostalgia very much.
It's so hard on yourself.
But like, I think like less so than nostalgia. More so than nostalgia, I think part of what really attracts me to making this documentary and, recreating and making a time capsule of this era. And then also now with working on a new book that focuses on the 90s is it's so much less noisy, and it's just a lot happier to tell stories, to tell real life stories about the pre-internet, pre-social media era. Like, hey, you know what? Like, not everyone liked Sonic. Tom Kalinske got some angry letters, but those letters weren't tweets, and then the media didn't cover, like, one angry person being upset. And that wasn't what the national discourse or even the enthusiast discourse was about, angry issues. It was generally this positivity or excitement or, schoolyard battles. But like, I felt like it was in a civil way or in a way that is much more fun for us to come into. Like, I mean, I don't know, we've spent, we spent like thousands of hours going through archival footage. And so such a small amount of it is like bickering over stupid little issues of people, like
the only one that I remember that was very significant was when SNES came out. Just all the parents were upset that like there was this and even Blake's parents were like this.
Right.
But like there's archival footage of people being like, I can't believe you're making us buy a new system. The old games don't work. And I think that was the one like major controversial issue. And again, there was antitrust suits against Nintendo that you'll learn about.
Yeah.
But like that just was very like business. Like I don't think we even were conscious of this. I don't think our parents were conscious of this.
I remember as a kid getting an SNES. It didn't even surprise me that the games were different. I don't know. It made sense. Like it's a different console. It's gonna be different games, and those new games look awesome. They're 16-bit. Like I don't know. Parents, man, they never understand.
I don't understand.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen. So tell us, when is this documentary going to be available, and how can people watch it?
It's available on CBS All Access. It's the first original documentary on the network. It's the streaming platform for CBS Viacom. Available on September 23rd. You can get CBS All Access on sort of any streaming device. And I believe there's a 7-day free trial, so you can check it out, watch the doc, check it out, see what else you like on there. There's a lot of great Star Trek programming. There's the Twilight Zone. There's the Good Fight. They're really building out the network. And I believe it's a lot of the Viacom properties are going to be on there as well since they merged earlier this year. So it's really exciting. But September 23rd, it's out. We can't wait for you guys all to see it.
That's awesome. Blake, any parting words?
Just that it's really nice to see you after all these years, and that we've done a few times over the years. And I look forward to continue to do that. I'll keep coming up with excuses to tell video game stories or geek so that I can come on. But no, just I'm not a very nostalgic person, but I do feel like this is a very special movie. Of course I do, because Jonah and I directed it. But I feel like it really is just a special story, and mostly what I'm happy for is people getting to experience it like through the horse's mouth, directly from the voices of these people, as opposed, I certainly feel competent and think highly of myself as a writer, but really there's nothing like capturing the actual words of Tom Kalinske or Ellen Beth Van Buskirk, especially because she's a great speaker. And I'm just so excited for people to hear the way that these heroes at Sega and Nintendo spoke, and get to hear the story from them.
I freaking love it. I'll tell you, as somebody who read the book, I'm so excited to watch the documentary and then go back and read the book again to get that additional detail. I think that's the best 1-2 punch. So congratulations, gentlemen. This is a huge achievement, and I know it's just step 2 of a 3-step plan, and I hope we get to do this again when the series comes out.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining, and if you guys have questions, leave them in the comments, and maybe we can have these guys back to answer a few questions in the near future. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Sure. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.